Have you ever wondered why sadness feels so familiar, so comfortable, that you find yourself returning to it again and again like an old friend? What if I told you that what you call sadness might actually be something else entirely? Something that ancient Taoist wisdom recognized thousands of years ago as one of the most subtle yet destructive forces in human experience? Today we're going to explore a profound insight that could completely transform how you understand your emotional patterns and finally free you from cycles that have kept you trapped for far too long. The ancient Taoist masters observed something remarkable about human nature that modern psychology is only beginning to understand. They noticed that many people who believed themselves to be chronically sad were actually experiencing something far more complex and insidious. They weren't just sad, they were addicted to the very thoughts, behaviors, and emotional states that created their suffering. This isn't about clinical depression or genuine grief, which are natural and necessary parts of the human experience. This is about something the Taoists called the attachment to suffering, a pattern so deeply embedded in our consciousness that we mistake it for our true nature. When Lao Tzu wrote about the nature of suffering in the Tao Te Ching, he wasn't just offering philosophical observations. He was revealing a fundamental truth about how we create our own prisons through our relationship with our thoughts and emotions. The Taoist understanding of what we might call sadness addiction begins with recognizing that the mind has an extraordinary capacity to become attached not just to positive experiences, but to negative ones as well. This attachment creates what the Taoists called artificial suffering, a type of pain that exists not because of external circumstances, but because of our internal relationship with those circumstances. Think about this carefully. How many times have you found yourself ruminating on past hurts, replaying conversations that went wrong, or imagining future scenarios where things go badly? How often do you catch yourself almost seeking out reasons to feel bad, scrolling through social media until you find something that triggers that familiar ache, or gravitating toward music, movies, or even relationships that reinforce a melancholic state? The Taoists would say this is not sadness at all, but a sophisticated form of addiction that uses emotional pain as its drug. The first principle that Taoist wisdom offers us in understanding this pattern is the recognition that what we resist persists, but what we embrace with awareness transforms. When we become addicted to sadness, we create a paradox. We say we want to feel better, but our actions consistently lead us back to the same emotional states. We claim we want peace, but we feed our minds a steady diet of thoughts that create turmoil. The Taoists understood that this happens because the ego mind becomes comfortable with familiar patterns, even when those patterns cause suffering. One of the most profound insights from Taoist teaching is that the addicted mind creates identity around suffering. You might notice yourself saying things like, "I'm just a sad person," or "This is just who I am," or "I've always been this way." But according to Taoist philosophy, none of these statements reflect your true nature. Your true nature, what the Taoists call your original face, is inherently peaceful, joyful, and free. The sadness you've become attached to is like clouds covering the sun. The clouds are real. They can be dense and dark, but they are not the sky itself. The second principle involves understanding what the Taoists called the sticky mind. When we become addicted to sadness, our consciousness becomes sticky, meaning it tends to grab onto and hold negative thoughts and emotions much longer than necessary. A healthy mind, according to Taoist teaching, is like water, flowing naturally and not holding on to any particular state. But the addicted mind is like honey, thick and clinging, making everything it touches heavy and difficult to release. This stickiness manifests in countless ways throughout your daily life. You might find yourself unable to let go of minor disappointments, holding on to them for hours or days longer than makes any sense. You might discover that you actually resist good news or positive experiences, finding ways to diminish them or worry about when they'll end. You might notice that you feel almost uncomfortable when things are going well, as if your system is so used to operating in a state of mild suffering that peace feels foreign and unsustainable. The Taoists also recognized that sadness addiction often involves what they called backward-flowing energy. Instead of allowing our life force to flow naturally forward, toward growth and possibility, we direct it backward, toward past hurts and regrets, or inward, toward self-criticism and rumination. This creates an energetic pattern that literally feeds the addiction, because the more attention and energy we give to these negative patterns, the stronger they become. The third principle that emerges from Taoist wisdom is the understanding that breaking free from sadness addiction requires what they called returning to the source. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to be happy or positive. In fact, the Taoist approach is quite the opposite. It involves developing such a deep awareness of your patterns that you begin to see them as separate from your true self. You start to notice the addiction in action, observing how your mind seeks out reasons to feel bad, how it resists contentment, how it creates stories that justify continued suffering. This observation without judgment is crucial, because the moment you start fighting your patterns or judging yourself for having them, you've fallen back into the very trap you're trying to escape. The Taoists understood that what you resist persists, so instead of resisting the addiction, you learn to observe it with the same detached curiosity you might have while watching clouds pass through the sky. One of the most practical applications of this principle involves learning to catch yourself in the act of feeding the addiction. You might notice yourself about to click on a news article that you know will upset you, or about to send a text message to someone who typically leaves you feeling drained. In these moments, instead of automatically following the impulse, you pause. You breathe. You ask yourself, am I about to feed the addiction right now? This simple question, asked with genuine curiosity rather than self-judgment, can begin to create space between you and your automatic patterns. The fourth principle draws from the Taoist concept of Wu Wei, often translated as effortless action or non-forcing. When it comes to breaking free from emotional addictions, Wu Wei teaches us that the solution is not to fight harder or try to force ourselves to feel different. Instead, it's about aligning with the natural flow of life energy and allowing our true nature to emerge organically. This might sound abstract, but it has very practical implications. Wu Wei, in the context of sadness, addiction means learning to recognize and follow the subtle energy of what actually nourishes your spirit, rather than what feeds your addiction. You begin to notice the difference between activities, thoughts, and relationships that genuinely uplift you versus those that provide the hollow satisfaction of familiar suffering. You start to choose based on what serves your authentic well-being, rather than what satisfies your addictive patterns. This often involves making surprisingly small changes that have profound effects. Maybe you realize that certain music consistently pulls you into melancholic states, so you experiment with listening to different kinds of music. Not because you're trying to force positivity, but because you're curious about what actually supports your natural vitality. Maybe you notice that you have a habit of calling a particular friend whenever you want to rehash old grievances, so you experiment with calling someone else instead, or taking a walk in nature, or simply sitting in silence. The fifth principle involves what the Taoists called cultivating the inner smile. This isn't about forcing yourself to be cheerful or pretending everything is fine when it isn't. The inner smile is a subtle, energetic state, a gentle appreciation for your own existence that can coexist with whatever emotions you might be experiencing. It's like having a warm, patient friend inside yourself who remains stable and kind regardless of what's happening on the surface of your mind. Cultivating the inner smile when dealing with sadness addiction involves developing a sense of compassionate humor about your own patterns. Instead of taking your addictive tendencies so seriously, you begin to see them with a lighter touch. You might catch yourself starting to spiral into familiar negative thoughts, and instead of getting frustrated with yourself, you smile inwardly and think something like, "Oh, there I go again, feeding the addiction." How interesting! This lightness doesn't minimize the reality of your experience, but it prevents you from adding additional layers of suffering on top of what's already there. The Taoist approach also emphasizes the importance of what they called returning to simplicity. Sadness addiction often involves incredibly complex mental and emotional patterns, elaborate stories about why you should feel bad, sophisticated justifications for remaining stuck. But underneath all this complexity, the Taoists taught, is something very simple, your natural state of being, which is inherently peaceful and content. Returning to simplicity might involve spending time in nature, where the complexity of your mental patterns becomes apparent against the backdrop of natural simplicity. It might involve engaging in simple physical activities like walking, gardening, or cooking, activities that ground you in present moment awareness and interrupt the mental loops that feed addiction. It might involve practicing basic mindfulness, simply noticing your breath or the sensations in your body, returning again and again to the most fundamental aspects of your immediate experience. The sixth principle emerges from the Taoist understanding of yin and yang, the complementary forces that exist within all of life. Sadness addiction often develops when we become identified too strongly with the yin aspects of experience, the receptive, introspective, and yes, sometimes melancholic energies, while rejecting or being afraid of the yang aspects, the active, expressive, and dynamic energies. healthy emotional life requires a natural flow between yin and yang states. Sometimes it's appropriate to be quiet, reflective, even sad. But when we become addicted to these states, we lose the natural rhythm that allows us to also experience joy, enthusiasm, and creative energy. The Taoist approach involves learning to honor both aspects of your nature without getting stuck in either one. This might involve paying attention to the natural rhythms in your own energy and learning to work with them rather than against them. If you notice you tend to feel low in the mornings, instead of fighting this or using it as evidence that you're fundamentally sad, you might use morning time for gentle yin activities like meditation or journaling and save more active yang pursuits for times when your energy naturally supports them. The seventh principle relates to what the Taoists called the practice of letting go. This is perhaps the most essential skill in breaking free from any addiction, including sadness addiction. Letting go doesn't mean suppressing or denying your feelings. It means developing the capacity to experience whatever arises without grasping onto it or pushing it away. In practical terms, this involves learning to feel sadness when it arises naturally without immediately creating stories about what it means or what you should do about it. It means experiencing disappointment without immediately escalating it into despair. It means noticing self-critical thoughts without automatically believing them or identifying with them. The practice of letting go is cultivated through what the Taoists called standing meditation, or zhanzhuang. This involves standing in a simple posture and learning to remain present with whatever arises in your body and mind without trying to change anything. As you stand, thoughts and emotions will arise, including the familiar patterns of sadness or self-criticism that feed your addiction. But instead of engaging with these patterns, you simply observe them, allowing them to come and go like weather passing through an open sky. This practice is profoundly effective because it trains you to be with difficult states without automatically reacting to them in ways that perpetuate suffering. You begin to develop what the Taoists called the immovable center, a place within yourself that remains stable regardless of what emotions or thoughts are passing through your awareness. The eighth principle involves understanding what the Taoists called the virtue of emptiness. In Taoist philosophy, emptiness is not a void or lack, but rather a spacious awareness that can hold anything without being disturbed by it. When we're addicted to sadness, our inner space becomes cluttered with repetitive thoughts, familiar emotional patterns, and stagnant energy. Cultivating emptiness means clearing this clutter and returning to a more spacious way of being. This spaciousness naturally dissolves addiction, because addiction requires mental and emotional congestion to survive. When your inner space is clear and open, negative thoughts and emotions can arise and pass away naturally, without getting stuck or creating the feedback loops that maintain addictive patterns. Cultivating emptiness might involve regular periods of silence, times when you deliberately disengage from mental activity and simply rest in open awareness. It might involve decluttering your physical environment, recognizing that external clutter often reflects and reinforces internal clutter. It might involve simplifying your daily routine, reducing the number of decisions and stimuli you encounter so that your mind has space to settle into its natural clarity. The ninth principle draws from the Taoist practice of following the natural way, or ziren. This involves aligning your life with the natural principles that govern all healthy growth and development. In nature, periods of dormancy are followed by periods of growth, periods of contraction are followed by expansion, and periods of darkness are followed by light. When we're addicted to sadness, we often try to maintain one particular state artificially, fighting against the natural rhythms that would carry us through different emotional seasons. Following the natural way means trusting that difficult emotions, when experienced fully and allowed to complete their natural cycle, will transform and give way to other states. This doesn't mean being passive or resigned to suffering. It means learning to distinguish between natural emotional responses, which have their own intelligence and timing, and addictive patterns which are repetitive and ultimately life-negating. Natural sadness, for example, often carries important information and tends to resolve naturally when we give it appropriate attention. Addictive sadness, on the other hand, is circular and doesn't lead anywhere constructive. The 10th and perhaps most transformative principle involves what the Taoists called recognizing your original nature. According to Taoist teaching, beneath all the patterns and addictions and learned behaviors is your true self, which is already whole, already free, already at peace. This true self doesn't need to be fixed or healed or improved. It simply needs to be uncovered. The process of uncovering your original nature begins with the radical recognition that you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, and you are not your addictive patterns. You are the aware presence that observes all of these phenomena. This awareness itself is never sad, never addicted, never damaged. It's the unchanging ground of your being, and it's always available to you. As you begin to identify more with this aware presence and less with the temporary contents of your mind, the addictive patterns naturally begin to weaken. They lose their grip because you're no longer exclusively identified with them. You start to experience them as weather patterns passing through the sky of your consciousness, rather than as fundamental facts about who you are. This shift in identification is perhaps the most profound healing available to human beings, and it's the essence of what all authentic spiritual traditions, including Taoism, point toward, is the recognition that your deepest nature is inherently free, regardless of what patterns or challenges might be present in your personality or circumstances. The journey of freeing yourself from sadness addiction is not about becoming a different person or achieving a permanently positive emotional state. It's about returning to who you really are beneath all the learned patterns and conditioned responses. It's about rediscovering the natural joy and peace that are your birthright, not because you've earned them or because your circumstances are perfect, but simply because joy and peace are the nature of consciousness itself. As you begin to implement these principles, you might notice that the process isn't linear. There will be times when you slip back into old patterns, times when the addiction reasserts itself, times when you forget everything you've learned and find yourself back in familiar cycles of suffering. The Taoist approach to this is characterized by infinite patience and gentle persistence. Each time you notice you've slipped back into addictive patterns, you simply begin again, returning to the practices that support your true nature. The beauty of this approach is that every moment offers a fresh opportunity to choose differently. You don't have to wait until tomorrow or next week or until you feel stronger. Right now, in this very moment, you can begin to observe your patterns with greater awareness. You can begin to cultivate the inner smile. You can begin to let go of thoughts and emotions, rather than grasping onto them. You can begin to rest in the spacious awareness that is your true nature. Remember that this work is not about perfection. It's about direction. Every small step you take toward greater awareness and freedom is valuable, even if it doesn't immediately transform your entire experience. The Taoists understood that lasting change happens gradually, like water slowly wearing away stone. Be patient with yourself and trust the process. If this exploration of sadness addiction through the lens of Taoist wisdom has resonated with you, I invite you to like this video and consider subscribing to this channel. We regularly share practical teachings from ancient wisdom traditions that can help you navigate the challenges of modern life with greater peace and understanding. Your engagement helps us continue creating content that serves your journey toward greater freedom and authentic happiness. The path to liberation is always available, and you don't have to walk it alone. Subscribe now and join a community of people who are committed to discovering their true nature and living from that place of natural wisdom and joy.